All right, so here we are, ready to get working with some PaintFX to make some plants and so on. I think I'm going to start maybe by doing some cattails just around the perimeter. We're going to do some lily pads too, but I'm actually going to model the lily pads and probably end up doing those with mesh. Uh, but um, but we'll get started with just some basic cattails because we have a PaintFX for cattails. So let's get into PaintFX a little bit. So what you're going to do to gain access to PaintFX is first you want to make sure that your plugin is turned on. Now by default, this should be a plugin that's on. So, but we're just going to make sure. And anytime I'm working with something that say, oh, I don't have this feature or option or whatever, I'm not doing anything that doesn't come with Maya already. So if you notice that, say, you don't have the Arnold renderer or something like that, you probably just don't have the plugin activated. So we're going to go to Windows. We're going to go to Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager. And then at somewhere, now I can't remember if PaintFX is here or in another location, but we could also just do a search for like Paint or FX. Yes, I don't think PaintFX is actually here, but just to kind of show you what I'm talking about, if we scroll through this, there's a lot of stuff, and it's nothing you should be super concerned about at the moment, because like I said, we're kind of working with everything that's just turned on by default with Maya. But we have, this is Bifrost, so this is sort of like a simulation plugin. There's our Mash plugin right there, so we can see that that's on. M2A, that's our Arnold plugin. Sweet Mesh. So everything that I'm working with is all this stuff turned on by default. Now your PaintFX, I believe if it's not there, it's going to be under settings and preferences, and it may be under one of these. There it is, under modules. So we have dynamics and PaintFX. So if you don't notice that it's on, or you don't have that option, you can just turn that on there. And then what we're going to do is go down to generate in our modeling menu. We're going to go to generate, and we're going to go to get brush. And this will open our content browser, which is something that is awesome. It's basically all these default assets in Maya that you can just use. And it's going to automatically open to our PaintFX folder, and you can see that there's all kinds of stuff in here. So actually a lot of really cool stuff. So we have, clouds, electrical, feathers. Now, again, like I said, a lot of PaintFX is very old and doesn't work well with the newer technology that Maya has, like the Arnold renderer. So we're going to have to kind of fiddle with it a little bit to get it to work. But you can see that there's a lot of really cool stuff here. So grasses, if we look in grasses, you'll see that there are some cattails. And there's actually some cactus grass there. We might use that. We might use the corn for our little garden area right here as well. So I think I might do like some rows of corn in there. But yeah, let's just start out with the cattails. So I'm going to select cattails. And then you should see right off the bat, if I try to draw on our surface here like that, we're going to get a little tiny line there. And there is, if you can see it, there is something there. It's just very tiny because our scale is a bit off. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to hold down my B key, B for brush, left click and drag, and that will increase my brush size. If I get these a little too big, it's not a huge deal because I can adjust that after the fact. I think that might be good. I'm going to paint them on this part of the ground here. So I want them to come above my water. But that's, again, that's something that I can adjust later. So what I'm going to do is let's actually get out of our PaintFX brush by hitting W, which is just our move tool. I'm going to select our water here, and for now I'm just going to hit Control H and hide that. And then I'm going to select our little lake bed or our little mound geometry here. And then again, I'm going to go to Generate, go down to PaintFX and go to Make Paintable. And then once again, I'm going to go to Generate and get Brush and select the brush that I want. So that was under grasses and cattail. And now I can just kind of draw. I'm going to need to increase my brush size again. But I can just draw some cattails there. I think that's a little small. I want to go a little bit bigger. And now I'm just going to start with one little line of cattails like this and kind of get my settings right on this before I want to move forward. So this looks pretty good. And from a distance, I think most of this geometry is going to be fine. The one thing I do want to change is the actual cattail itself. Just doesn't look very good. So we want to change some things here in our settings. So the first thing I want to do is I want to change the type of PaintFX we're using here. So I'm going to go over to my cattail one here, and I changed my brush type from paint to mesh. And that will change things up a little bit. That will start making them look a little bit nicer. They're kind of twisted. They have a little bit more geometry there. But I want them to be a little bit more round, right? So I'm going to go down to, and you know, PaintFX, there's a lot of stuff here. So we're not going to cover everything in detail. The one thing that I would recommend if you really want to get into tweaking this is just looking at the help docs. Autodesk has great help docs for Maya. But mainly, the main thing that we're going to be changing here is going to be under the tubes menu. And then we're going to go down to creation. And then one more, we'll go down to growth. So basically what we're looking at here is creation is sort of like the basic overall settings for the geometry of our PaintFX. And then we can sort of select specific things. So if we have a tree, we could have twigs and leaves. In this case, we just have branches, which are the main stem, and then we have the flower, which is actually our little cattail there. So what I want to edit is down in our flowers, and I actually want to come to our petal width scale here, and I want to kind of make it rounded off by adding points and just kind of moving them around. And I want this to be a little bit more of a smooth transition. So I'm just going to select my points and change this from none to spline. I'm going to do that for each one of my little points there. Set those all to spline. And this will just give me a bit of a smoother transition. And then we can edit these guys a little bit further. You know, I can change I don't want to change the number of flowers, right? That's going to add more of those cattails. But I can sort of edit the length a little bit. And I don't want these to be maybe a little bit wider at the base than the top. Maybe something like that, but not too much. Nothing too crazy. And some of these are kind of just up to the very point there. So I want to, let's see where that's going to be. Flower start, I believe, is our position. So I'm just going to lower them down a little bit until we see that all of them are sort of below that point. So I think that looks pretty good there. So now I can go about the rest of my scene, and if I draw some PaintFX, there you see that they're not getting those same settings there. So what I want to do is I want to take my cattails here, right? And I want to make a preset out of these. So I'm going to go to presets and I'm going to say edit preset. Actually, I want to do this to the cattail here because this is the one that I'm changing. So go to edit preset or say brush preset. And I'm just going to name this cattail cattail mod because I modified the current cattail. Save attribute preset. And now if we go to presets, we'll see cattail mod. So now what I can do with our brush, my brush went away. But if I go back up to generate, get brush, come down to our grasses, cattail, again, increase our size a little bit. I'm just going to go through and kind of draw some more cattails in some other areas. Just in some of these empty areas around my scene. All right, not quite sure what happened to these guys here. But now what I can do is just go through and select each one, cattail 2, and just change my preset to each one of those. Should be able to go through and select them all. I'm not sure if this will work, but let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can select them all and change the preset to replace. And let's just, out of curiosity, yeah, so that didn't work. So we need to just go through and do them one at a time, which is a little bit of a pain. There's probably even a faster way to do this, but this is the way that we're going to do it. And I'm just going down the line here to make sure that I don't skip any of them. All right, so then we can just kind of look around and double verify that all of our cattails look good. Okay. Now, here's our next problem that we're going to have. If I do a render of this, so let me actually just zoom into my cattails here and just do a little quick test render. Nothing is there. Now, nothing is there because these are still PaintFX, and Arnold just doesn't even acknowledge or recognize PaintFX at all. So we need to turn these from PaintFX into actual geometry. So to do that, what we're going to do is go from just select all of our strokes that we've created here. right? And we're going to go to modify, convert, and we're going to go to create PaintFX to polygons. Look at our options here. You're probably good just keeping the default options here. So I do like to choose quad outputs just so you don't have any triangles or any weird geometry. Now the vertex color we're not worried about. We're gonna throw our own shaders on here, and yeah, we'll just hit convert. And this will take all of your geometry here now and make them, or all of our PaintFX here and make them geometry. So again, we'll do a little quick render of this. And if I can manage to deselect them, now we'll see those cattails. Now, obviously, they're not shaded properly, so we're going to have to do some shadings, change some shading for them. But first, I just want to get a little bit more organized. So what we're going to need to do here is, if I look in each one of these little groups, you'll see that there's a main, cattail main, which obviously is the stem for all of our cattails, and then a cattail flower, right? That's going to be the actual cattail for everything. So I want to take each one of these and organize them into their own separate groups. That way I can apply a separate shader to them, and just be a little bit more organized overall. So you can start to see that this will get very sort of complicated as a scene. So that's why I wanted to go through and just clean my scene up first. That way I have lots of room in my outliner to kind of just work on things as they are. And now I'm going to show you a really easy way to do this, or sort of like a tricky, easy way to organize things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and like say, we'll start with the main, cattail main. I'm going to select that first one, and I'm going to hold down Control or Command and then just select the cattail main for each one. And then I'm going to hold down my space bar or go up to Mesh and Combine. So space bar, Mesh, Combine. And now that's going to take all of those cattail stems and add them to one. They're going to make them all one object. So then I'm going to do the same for my flowers. Make sure we get the right object selected here. And then go to, I'll do this the other way. We'll go to Mesh, Combine. And then I'm going to select both of those. I'm going to delete the history on them, which is going to get rid of all of those empty nodes there. And then I can delete all of those strokes. And now I just have two objects. That's basically just my cattail stems and my cattail sort of tails themselves. So from here, then I can just add other material to them. So for our stems, we'll add a new, you see that there's a lot of different shaders here too. So we're going to clean that up at some point as well. So a lot of this stuff gets created, a lot of those shaders gets created whenever you're using PaintFX. So assign favorite material, we'll do just a new standard surface, and I'm going to name this cat. Actually, we'll probably use this material on a few different objects. So I'm just going to name this green stem or green plant SS. We're going to change the color to be a sort of yellowish desaturated green like that. The stem can be a little shiny. But that's basically it. That's all we need for that. And then our cattails here, we're going to go to same thing, assign new material, standard surface. And I'm going to say, we'll name this cattail brown SS. And then this one, we're obviously going to make brown, maybe a darker brown. I'm going to increase the diffuse roughness on this quite a bit and our specular roughness, because we want this to look, if anything, a little bit fuzzy. So I want both of those, diffuse and specular, to be very rough. And then we can do a quick render, see what that looks like. So yeah, it looks pretty good. If anything, I think perhaps the cattail brown is a bit too bright. So I think that looks a little bit more nice. We can go in here and look for our water and turn our water back on and get a render of what that's going to look like from a distance here. I think I may have broke our render from turning that water on while it was trying to render. All right, so yeah, there we can see that our cattails there. Not super crazy, but I kind of like the look. I might add some sort of grasses down here at the bottom as well, just to kind of get some variation. They do have sort of leaves, which in this situation we don't really see. I do kind of think that green is also a tad bright, so I'm going to go down to my green plant and maybe just darken that and desaturate it a little bit more. All right, and then let's just hide our water one more time, and let's add some sort of grasses to around the cattails as well. So let's go to once again, let's go to generate, get brush, grasses. I don't really want to use anything too thick, because because I don't really want to like bog down our system or use up a lot of our resources. So I want to try to stay fairly light here. And you can definitely experiment with some different things. Like we could try this field grass, which is kind of, if I'm looking at the description here or the little thumbnail, it looks like it has some wheat stuff on the top. So I don't really want that. I think maybe I'm just going to use this jungle grass. So that's obviously way too big. So it's quite the crazy grass there. So that's a little bit much for what we want. So I'm going to try to make my brush very tiny. Even that is a bit ridiculous. Let's try a different grass here. Let's try this tall. The scale's all kinds of crazy here for this, right? So like you get different scales. Let's try field grass. So I can easily just turn these things off if I want. But I think this is a decent looking grass here that we can kind of just add around all of our objects. Now I'll show you another way you can very quickly just kind of set them all to the same once we change them. So say I want to come in here now to my field grass, and I'm going to come down to tubes, and I can just turn off leaves and flowers, and then I'm just going to get grass. And that's basically all I want there. But anytime we do it again, we're going to see those leaves and flowers again. So so I'm just going to go through and kind of paint some grass in. And you don't have to get too crazy with it. I'm kind of just going to do it, I think, where we're going to see it a little bit. So maybe some grasses under the dock. And over here. So just something along the lines of that. Now what I can do is I can take let's see. So we can go to our first stroke here. I think this should work. We can go to generate and go to get settings from selected stroke, right? And then we can select each one and go to apply settings to selected stroke. And then we can just select each one down the list and hit G. All right, your G key is always going to repeat the last action. So that's a really easy, quick way to do that. And now, once again, we need to convert these to polygons. So we're going to go to modify, convert PaintFX to polygons. We want to do all of those, not just the one that I had selected. Okay, and then we're going to grab all of those and just combine them together. Mesh, combine. Delete our history on them. Then we can delete our strokes. And for this one, the field grass, I'm just going to apply the material that we already have, the grass material that we already have. So let's go to grass mat. And once again, we'll turn our water back on. So you can see like what this is going to look like with water. And we'll do a little quick test render. So it's a little subtle. I think I would have made it look a little bit more visible. Let's zoom in a little bit, see how it looks. So we do see it down there. I think that's fine. I think I would have made it, if I weren't worried about rendering times, I would have made it quite a bit more thick. But I think that's pretty good. So now let's tackle something like a tree. So I kind of had an idea of having a big tree either here or back here, and then maybe some smaller trees around this corner here. So what I want to do is I want to make this section here paintable. So I'm going to go to Generate, Make Paintable. And then I'm going to go to Generate, Get Brush. And we're going to go down to Trees and Trees Mesh and just kind of pick the one that you want. Again, you can edit this quite a bit. So if it doesn't look the way that you want it to look, it's fine. I kind of had a look at these earlier, and I think for this first big tree, maybe a birch or a maple. Now, some of these won't really work, especially if you're not looking in the mesh, if you're just looking in trees. Just to give you an example, if I were to do something like pine forest, right? And let's make our brush quite a bit bigger. Let's do something like that. It's just giving us these tubes basically with a texture on them. So this isn't really going to work for our application. We need something that's actually going to look like a tree. So you may find that some of these just don't work for you, but experiment, find one that works well for you. I think I'm going to go with this maple. And that's very small, so we want it to be quite a bit bigger. And you can do a few, obviously. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw sort of like a line of them like this. And then we're going to get in here and start editing this a little bit and maybe move it around and get this looking the way that we want. So the first thing I want to do is change the amount of them. I don't really quite like how many there are. So I'm going to go to it's going to be Maple 1 here, and we're going to go all the way up to Brush, Profile, Channels. Actually, I think it's going to be under Creation here. Tubes per step. If we decrease that down quite a bit, we'll get fewer trees. So maybe just something like that. just like 3 of them. And I can change their position later. I'm not really worried about that. And I can come in here and say, look at their branches, twigs, leaves, and so on. So I can go to their branches and I can make more branches if I want this to be a little bit more dense. And I can also change their leaves. If I want their leaves to look a little bit more leaf-like, we can go down to leaves and we can kind of change the profile. Let's change this to linear. So we can kind of get this looking like an actual leaf. But, you know, we're gonna, for the most part, we're gonna be looking at this like this far away. So I'm not too heavily concerned on what these are gonna look like. So yeah, let's just maybe mess with this as it is and see if we can get this looking decent. So let's we just leave our settings as they are. And I'm going to go to modify, convert, PaintFX polygons, and then they become 2 different guys. Now with this one, there's a little bit of a different take I want on this one, because I want, you know, these are basically, we have the leaves and then we have the branches. Now I want to be able to manipulate and move these individually. So so we want to do things a little bit differently here in terms of how we group these together and how we get these to work properly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the branches. So we'll just hide the leaves now. So I'm going to Control H to hide all those leaves. I'm going to take our branches here and I'm going to separate them. So we're going to go to Mesh, Separate. And this will give us a lot of different objects here, right? Because if I were to look at my branches here, we have a lot of different objects here. But basically I want to then take these one at a time and just select them as they are here. So I have like one whole tree selected here, and then I'm going to go to Mesh, Combine this guy back together. But it's by itself now. It's not all these individual parts. So same thing with this one. Just going to select a big group like this and then Control deselect anything that I don't want to be a part of that selection. You can always tell that your selection is going to be a bit off if your pivot point is sort of way over out of here. That most likely means that you're going to have another selection somewhere. So what you can do is just Control and kind of select something like that. No, it doesn't look like we do. Let me go through my outliner and just make sure that I don't have anything else selected. Yeah, so I only want the objects in that group to be selected. And then there are a few other little pieces here that I didn't get. So we're just going to grab those guys. And once again, do Mesh, Combine. And now this little one here is going to be fairly easy, right? Because we can just do that in our outliner. So I'm going to delete the history on that guy. Give that a second. Delete the history on this guy. And then the only thing we have left in our group is that last tree. So I'm just going to select all of those. Once again, do mesh, combine. Delete the history on it. And then we just have those 3 tree groups. So I'm going to name this Maple 1, Maple 2, Maple 3, right? And then we can add a material to this. So I'm going to right click, go to assign favorite, standard surface. I'll name this tree brown. We could probably even use the same material that's on our boards for this. Might actually do that. I think that might be the way to go. That way we will get a little bit of color variation in each one. So we'll go ahead and do that. We're just going to select all 3 of these and assign existing material, and I'm going to choose wood. Okay. And now for the leaves. So the idea here is that I want to keep these trees and their leaves together so I can sort of manipulate and move them around as they are. So we'll unhide our leaves. So Shift H for our leaves. And we're going to kind of do the same thing for the leaves. We want to separate them all first, which is going to be a little bit daunting. But then I want to group them with their perspective trees. I want to actually leave the leaves separately so we can get some color variation. But I want to group them with their tree. So I'm going to select all the leaves and we're going to go to Mesh, Separate. Give that a second. There's a lot of objects, so sometimes separate can take a few minutes. All right, now once that's all done, I think it's still going. All right, there we go. Once that's all done, we see that all our leaves are separated. My system seems to be chugging a bit. Turn off cache playback. We don't need that. There we go. So just let it do its thing for a few minutes and it'll start being responsive again. So then I just want to take all of these, select them with my tree, right? And I'm just going to group these together. Control G. I forgot a little leaf right there. Right. So let's do that again. Control G. And then I'll name this Maple. Let's do Maple _01. We can't name it the same thing because it doesn't. Maya doesn't like when things are named the same. And then these two are going to be a bit of a pickle because they're so close together. But I'm not super worried about it. So we're just going to select like that. And then I'm just going to go through and deselect. Anything that just seems like it doesn't belong. Oops. It's okay if it's not perfect. It's fine. Again, this is going to be fairly small, so I'm not super worried about. And then I just want to add these selections to the ones we missed. Select all those, do Control G. And now that they're in a group, we can see that we can move this away. And we kind of got some leaves off of that one, but that's fine. And then we can name this Maple 02. And then do the same thing for this guy as well. For some reason I missed a bunch of those up there, so I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and just add to my selection there, and then Control G to group them all together. And name this Maple 3 whenever it lets us. Spelled a couple of those wrong. And then I'm just going to delete my history on them. Delete history. And now we could take this further. We could make these mesh objects if we really wanted to distribute them over a large space. In this case, I only need like 2 or 3 of them, maybe 3 or 4 of them. So I'm not worried about distributing a ton of them, but you could take this further and distribute them all. Turn them into mesh objects and make an entire forest out of them if you wanted to. So in this case, it's taking a few seconds for the history to delete because there's just so many leaves, and I do want to keep the leaves separate as separate objects so I can have little variations in texture to them. And then when that is done, the other thing I want to do here is center their pivot point on each group. And this will just help me sort of move things around a little bit. So I'm going to do that by jumping into my top view. And I'm going to select each one. And then I'm going to go to hold down D, which will change my pivot point here. And then, oops. And then change the pivot point to close to the center of that tree. Doesn't have to be right on it. I'm just trying to get it close. And then I'll jump to a side view. And it's already at the origin, so I'm not too concerned about that, but I actually kind of want it to be slightly above the bottom of the tree. And that way, if I do decide to use this in a mesh network, it's going to sit below the ground, so I won't have the tree floating up. So as long as it's above that. And then the other tree doesn't want to show up in my side view. So in my front, there it is, my front view. All right, now we can move and sort of rotate these trees around. To the position we want. So say I'm going to put this tree kind of over here in this corner. And you want to do the group. You don't want to just select the trunk of the tree, otherwise you're just going to move the tree. So we want to do the group, not the and I kind of like this one where it is kind of over the house a little bit. All right, so that is looking good. Now we just need to deal with the shading for our leaves. Now this is going to be sort of the tough thing because we have so many of them. I think the easy thing to do would just be to select all three of our groups here. And then right click, assign new favorite material. And that will hopefully assign the material to all of our trees. And again, it's going to take a second because there's so many objects there. So just be patient. All right, so that did take a little bit longer than I wanted, but it works nonetheless. So for here for the leaves, the color, I'm going to go ahead and just assign a AI color jitter to this because I do want this to be varying in colors. So I'm going to look for, go to Arnold, just look for AI color jitter. Now my original idea was to have these at like a bit of an autumn color, so like an orangish color, but I'm not sure how well that's going to work out. So we'll just kind of tweak these settings a tad right now, and then go from there. And then for the tree trunks, we can just go and reapply our other material to this. So assign existing material, wood SS. I just want to make sure that I got that right. And then we can do a little quick test render here, see how this looks. So overall, I think they're way too brightly colored, and we could probably make them, the color on them, jitter a little bit more. So let's see if we can tweak those a little bit. I find that going much darker with your input, and then that way you can increase your gain a little bit more for the color jitter. Even though, okay, I forgot to set my user data to object. There we go. That's something for some reason I always forget to do. So the hue you want to be very careful with. You don't want to bring the hue up or down too much. And then the saturation, I actually want to give this some negative saturation. So like -1 is a bit too much, -0.1. And then we can go up to maybe 0.5 just to get a lot of color variation there. Again, you don't want to mess with the hue too much because you don't want it to change to a green hue, or actually we may want to change it to a green hue, but let's see, if we go a bit higher on the hue max, that will bump us into a green territory. So that way we can have some green leaves. If we go this way, it will give us some red, more fall, maple-like leaves. I think we may want to go for the min. We may want to go down. So yeah, I think something like that is looking pretty good. And then if I do want to go to a greenish color, I can just very easily change that to a greenish color. I think I kind of like that orangish yellow autumn color a little bit more though. And then we could, if you want to take this a step further, we could go into like our roughness. I don't want to make them too shiny, but we can have them something around there. We could turn on, if you want to turn on your subsurface, you could turn your subsurface on, and then you get a little bit of like scattering happening there. I don't know if I really like that. And so instead of subsurface, you could also come down to geometry and click on thin walled, and that will also sort of change the appearance. And we could give it thickness too, but I don't think we need to do that. I kind of like it the way it is. And if we zoom out a little bit, kind of get an idea of our whole scene here. Overall, I think with the grass in there, I think those trees look pretty good. I like those quite a bit there. Once we get some bushes, and I think I may add a line of trees over here as well, and just some bushes around the house and little patches of grass. So I will go forward with that. I'll work on that. And then when I come back in our next video, I'll show you how to take all of the sort of foliage and things that we've made so far with our PaintFX, and how to bring them back into our main scene with little to no issues.